By the winter of 1940s, Subhas Chandra Bose had lost almost everything he had spent his life building. He had been expelled from college. He had walked away from the finest career the British Empire could offer an Indian. He had lost his mentor. He nearly lost his life in a prison, and after winning election to lead the Indian National Congress, he had been forced out of the party. He was 43 years old. He was under guard inside his own home in Calcutta. He had no office, no army, no territory, and he never held real power. Within 3 years, tens of thousands of soldiers would raise their hands and swear to fight under his leadership. This is the story of Subhas Chandra Bose, became powerful by losing almost everything. Subhas Chandra Bose was born on January 23, 1897, the ninth of 14 children. His father, Janakinath Bose, was a respected lawyer who had risen successfully within British system. His mother, Prabhavati Devi, was deeply religious. Their household ran on English furniture and English ambition. Janakinath wanted his sons to rise inside the very system that ruled them, and Subhash seemed perfectly capable of doing so. He ranked second in all of Calcutta in his matriculation examination and earned the place at the prestigious Presidency College. But how does a boy raised to serve the empire end up sworn to destroy it? The answer lies in a man who shaped him the most, a sannyasi called Swami Vivekananda. He left this world in 1902, yet his message of serving India, itself a form of worship, was still setting the country's youth on fire. It caught Subhash and never let go. That pull ran so deep that as a teenager he left his family's world. He went north towards Himalayas to become a sannyasi. He eventually returned home, but with a single purpose: to fight for the independence of his country. The first rupture came in 1916, when a professor named Edward Oughton was accused of racially insulting Indian students. Bose, present, vocal, unrepentant, was blamed as the ringleader and rusticated from the Presidency College. It was the first time he chose his conscience over his own future. It would not be the last. 3 years later, the same troublemaker sailed for Cambridge to sit the Indian Civil Service exam, the ultimate insider's prize, because his father insisted. With only 8 months to prepare against Englishmen who had trained for years, Bose ranked 4th in all of Britain. He had just proven he could rule India on Britain's own terms. The Indian Civil Service offered status, security, and lifetime of privilege. But accepting it required loyalty to the very empire he had already begun to oppose. So, in April 1921, Bose resigned before formally entering the service. He had never spent a single day on the job. That year, he also met Mohandas Gandhi for the first time. He came away unconvinced. Both men wanted to free India, but they disagreed sharply on how to get there. Gandhi believed in disciplined non-violence and gradual mass mobilization. Bose was already searching for something faster. The mentor Bose actually found was closer to home, the Calcutta barrister Chittaranjan Das, the man the Bengal called Deshbandhu. Das gave the young rebel a purpose. By 1924, at just 27, Bose was effectively running Calcutta as the chief executive officer of its corporation, the youngest man ever to hold the post. And he used it to steer jobs and funds towards the nationalist the British considered dangerous. So, the British skipped the courtroom altogether, invoking a century-old emergency law. They jailed him with no charge, no trial, and no release date, branding him a secret backer of Bengal's armed revolutionaries, and shipped him more than 1,000 miles away to Burma. Locked away in Burmese prison, even the news of his mentor's death was kept away from him. Bose only learned about his death days later in a newspaper. Grief and a severe case of tuberculosis nearly killed him in that cell. When British eventually released him on medical grounds, he jumped into organizing Congress's youth and labor wings. Das' death also opened a succession war. Bengal's Congress splintered between Bose's faction and a rival faction led by J.M. Sengupta. For the first time, Bose was not only fighting the British Empire, he was fighting for survival within his own party. That conflict would teach him a lesson he would never forget. The empire was no longer the only thing standing in his way. In the 1930s, Gandhi lit the fuse of civil disobedience movement with the Salt March and calling millions of Indians to openly break the empire's laws. And Bose threw Bengal into campaign with everything he had. The British arrested him again inside Alipur jail. Guards beat him unconscious. While Bose lay in prison nursing his broken ribs, extraordinary news arrived. Calcutta had just elected him its mayor, but the honor turned bitter fast. Dragged in and out of prison, Bose could barely govern the city, and by 1932, his health had collapsed again. Terrified that their most dangerous prisoner might die in the custody and hand India a martyr, the British offered an exile, disguised as mercy. He could leave prison for a medical treatment, but only if he left India. The empire hoped distance would silence him. Instead, it gave him a larger stage. Bose arrived in Europe convinced that Gandhi's strategy had reached its limits. He treated exile not simply as recovery, but as an opportunity to study power. He travelled across the continent as unofficial ambassador of India. Europe was tearing itself apart, and Bose studied it closely. From Mussolini's Italy to Soviet Russia, he met with political leaders to answer one question: what could India learn from these rapid revolutions? These years produced The Indian Struggle, a book that made his break with older Congress leadership increasingly visible. Watching from Europe, as Gandhi called off civil disobedience movement, Bose joined Vittalbhai Patel in a blunt public verdict that Mahatma Gandhi had failed as a political leader. And in private, his words were sharper. Gandhi is an old useless piece of furniture. He has done a good service in his time, but he is an obstacle now. Bose had begun to believe that India's freedom struggle required an entirely different kind of leadership. And then in Vienna, his life took an unexpected turn. Over there, he met someone. Her name was Emilie. Bose had hired the young Austrian woman to help prepare the Indian freedom struggle. She became his closest companion, later his secret wife, and eventually the mother of his only child. Yet Bose kept that part of his life hidden from the public. But even in Europe, the British continued watching him. His political activity abroad had alarmed the government enough that he was warned not to return to India. In 1936, Bose came home anyway, and true to the threat, they seized him instant he stepped off the boat in Bombay. Every arrest was meant to silence him. Every arrest only made him more important. And the man they kept locking away was now preparing for the biggest political confrontation of his life. Within 2 years, Subhas Chandra Bose would rise to lead the Indian National Congress. Then, he would collide head-on with the most powerful figure in the national movement, Mahatma Gandhi. By the time Bose walked free in 1937, India's political climate had shifted. Younger revolutionaries were tired of political petitions and half measures. Bose gave them a voice. He promised complete independence and a nation that would take its freedom by force, if necessary. Overnight, his popularity surged. In 1938, Bose became the president of Indian National Congress at Haripura. But Gandhi operated as the unofficial super president of the Congress. And Bose was no puppet. He had his own vision for India's freedom, one that made a direct clash with Gandhi inevitable. An year later, that clash boiled over. Bose wanted a second term as Congress president. Gandhi opposed him and placed the full weight of his influence behind Pattabhi Sitaramaiah. Bose won anyway, but Gandhi took the result as a personal wound, announcing that the defeat was more mine than his. And from that moment, he set out to make Bose's position unbearable. Historian R.C. Mujumdar noted that Gandhi acted as the dictator of the Congress party. When the party's own elected leader refused to bow to his wishes, Gandhi simply made sure no one would work with him, starving Bose of the colleagues and machinery any president needs to govern. In public, almost no one dared to stand with Bose. The rare exception was not a politician at all, but a poet, Rabindranath Tagore, who saw a Congress grown more loyal to one man than its own principles. Rather than preside over a Congress tearing itself apart over him, he walked away. In April 1939, he resigned the presidency and founded the Forward Bloc to pull India's scattered radicals into one force. He had reached the very top of the national movement, and once again, he let it go without flinching, because a title he could not use in a party that would not follow him meant nothing to a man who only ever wanted to free his country. It was that refusal to cling to power more than any office that made people ready to follow him anywhere. Then in September 1939, Europe went into war. Britain declared a war on Germany and brought India into the conflict without consulting a single Indian representative. To Bose, this was an opportunity he had been waiting for. The British Empire was distracted. overstretched, and fighting for survival. India had to strike now, not after the war, not after another negotiation. Now, Gandhi and Nehru saw the crisis differently. They opposed the war, yet leaned towards cooperation, betting that patience and negotiations would win India its freedom after Britain won its war. This was the same strategy Congress followed during World War I. Bose was certain that it was a fatal mistake. In June 1940, the revolutionary Veer Savarkar told him plainly what he had already come to believe. Stop waiting, leave India, and raise an army from beyond its borders. Weeks later, in July, the British jailed him yet again, this time for demanding the removal of Calcutta's Holwell Monument. By November 1940, Bose had refused food for days, gambling that British could not afford to let India's most dangerous rebel become its most powerful martyr. He was gambling his life to break the colonial authorities. And it worked. Terrified he would die in prison and ignite a national uprising, they let him out, placing him under strict house arrest at his family home on Elgin Road. The British believed they had finally contained him, but the house arrest was not the end of his fight. It was where he began planning his greatest one. Bose stopped thinking about petitions, party votes, and the man who would shut him out. A decision: he would cross any border and take help from anyone willing to strike the British, whoever they were. And he had settled on the one move no Indian leader ever did. He was going to slip out of India entirely. They had no idea a disguise was already being prepared. An escape route through hostile mountains was already being mapped. The most wanted man in the British Empire was about to vanish without a trace, only to resurface weeks later, standing face to face with Adolf Hitler. Historian R.C. Mujumdar drew a striking parallel to Bose's escape from British clutches and Shivaji's escape from the clutches of Aurangzeb. The great escape and hunt is about to begin. Part 2 drops in 10 days. Subscribe and turn the bell icon.